it's Mrs. McKelvy back with the next story in 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey. But before we get to today's story, I want to check in with you on yesterday's challenge. Were you able to find the website for the geocache for the story of the vigil at Carlisle Hall? Well, I decoded the message that was down at the bottom of that page, and it said base of double tree under rocks. So that's where this geocache is located. Well, let's get to today's story. It's called The Specter in the Maze at Cahaba. Cahaba is a really cool place because it was a capital of Alabama. Alabama has had several capitals, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Here is the story of the specter at the maze at Cahaba. Antebellum Cahaba was a pleasant place to live. There seemed to be no limit to the round of entertainment and visiting in the Dallas County town. Fine carriages awaited the arrival of each boat at the Cahaba landing to convey passengers to the homes where they would be guests. Down Vine Street, Cahaba's principal business section, they drove, past its paved walks shaded by ancient water oaks, mulberry and chinaberry trees, past the newspaper offices, the churches, the stores, and the telegraph office. Just outside town was a racetrack. Sometimes the rider who won the race would receive a silver-trimmed saddle as a prize. But some of the spectators won far more valuable monetary trophies. Beyond the racetrack was a secluded spot where cockfighting and occasionally gander pullings attracted younger gentlemen of the neighborhood. These sports, however, were frowned upon by their elders, and those who frequented them never talked about these events at home. If the guests drove through Cahaba in the afternoon, they would likely see the town's lawyers and doctors sitting along the shady sidewalks with their chairs tilted back and their feet resting on the gnarled tree trunks, laughing and talking until the lengthened shadows signaled time for supper. There was Saltmarsh Hall, scene of masked balls, enactments of romantic scenes from Byron and Moore, fanciful tableaux, and political orations fiery with talk of secession. Here at Saltmarsh Hall, the battle flag was presented to the Cahaba Rifles before the unit departed for service in the Confederate Army. The flag, which was in front on every field of battle from Manassas to Fredericksburg, was accepted by Colonel C.C. Pegues, then a captain, commanding officer of the Cahaba Rifles, Company F, 5th Alabama Regiment. It was this Confederate officer, Colonel Pegues, who owned the property at which the ghostly phenomenon bearing his name manifested itself. There were grander and costlier homes in Cahaba than the one occupied by Colonel Pegues and his family, but none could surpass it for hospitality. The house had been a jail during the years of 1820 to 1826, when Cahaba was the capital of Alabama, a background that provided the Pegues family much amusement. After Colonel Pegues purchased the property, he planned and supervised its renovation so expertly that it bore no resemblance to the place of incarceration it had once been. The Pegues home fronted on Pine Street and occupied the entire block between Pine and Chestnut. Magnolia trees, Lombardy pines, and oaks grew about the grounds, and flower gardens and fountains added to the tranquil beauty of the place. The most distinctive feature of the premises, and the one most enjoyed by young guests, was the labyrinth or maze of thick cedars. No place in Cahaba was more popular with couples out for a stroll than was this evergreen labyrinth, and leisurely walks through the Pegues' maze became part of the ritual of courtship in Cahaba. So it was that one soft moonlit night in the spring of 1862, a young Confederate soldier and his sweetheart were promenading in the Peguses' garden. He had only a few days' leave, and there was much he wanted to say to the beautiful girl with him. Before the promenade began, the young people had paid a proper call on the elders of the Peguses' home. The soldier perhaps had brought messages from Colonel, who was then in Virginia with the Cahaba rifles. This duty discharged, they now turned their thoughts from the tragedy of war to the joy of their own reunion. Their stroll led them naturally to the maze of cedars. They had entered one of the circular walks leading to the center of the labyrinth when a large, white, glowing ball darted toward them. It appeared to be floating in the air a few feet above the ground, as though controlled by some powerful but invisible force. The ball played a taunting game with them, swerving from one side of the walk to the other, and then hovering directly in front of the couple, almost daring them to catch it. Then it would recede and disappear in the thick cedars, reappearing seconds later right beside the startled pair. The soldier, being accustomed to having solid and logical explanations for everything, was at a loss to explain the antics of the luminous ball or to account for its origin. But he decided it must be an illusion caused by the reflections of the moonlight on some object hidden from their view. "Don't be frightened," he said, putting his arm gently and protectively around his girl's waist. "It's just some trick the moonlight is playing. Let's walk back toward the house. I'm sure the thing won't appear again." But it did. They had retraced their steps only a short distance through the maze when the bright sphere appeared in front of them and began performing all sorts of gymnastics. This time, motivated by both curiosity and exasperation, the soldier jumped toward the object and tried to catch it. But just as he seemed to have it in his grasp, the ball twirled away and disappeared completely. When the young couple returned to the Peguses' home with their strange story, they were accused of being moonstruck. However, the account of their encounter with the apparition was upsetting to the women of the household, who wished more fervently than ever that the colonel was at home to protect them from whatever it was that was cavorting around in the night. After its initial appearance, the dancing ball of light was seen by several other people. Their stories of its erratic behavior differed only in small ways from the accounts given by the couple who first saw it. The phenomenon became known as Pegasus' ghost, and stories of its antics were told throughout the countryside. Strolling in the maze became more popular than ever as couples hoped and feared that they might also have an encounter with the eerie object. And what girl could object to having a strong protective arm around her in such frightening surroundings? Colonel Pegues himself probably never heard about the ghostly ball which bears his name, for he was mortally wounded in the Battle of Gaines's Mill, Virginia, on June 27, 1862, and he died July 15, 1862. He was buried at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. When news of his death reached Cahaba, a boy ringing a bell went from house to house, carrying a black-bordered funeral notice. From the messenger's shoulders flowed long black streamers known as weepers, a Cahaba custom which has long since disappeared. Gone, too, is the old Peguses' home, the flowering shrubs, the fountains, and the maze. A few clumps of old-fashioned yellow jonquils and some scattered piles of broken brick are all that remain to mark the scene where the strangely bright Pegasus ghost caused such excitement more than a century ago. But stories of the glowing ball are still told, and occasionally a fisherman returning home late at night from an outing on the river, or a hunter trying to follow the baying of his hound, will report seeing a white fireball near where the circle of cedars once provided a background for the supernatural display. And that's the end of the story. Well, you can still go and visit Cahaba today, and it's actually now a ghost town, a real Alabama ghost town. And when you go and visit, no one lives there anymore. You can see the bricks that the story was talking about from this old home right down next to the river, and read about how it was once a prison. There are some ruins of other houses that are there, but they're off limits because they're not safe to go into. And the old cemetery is still there at Cahaba. So maybe sometime you and your family want to go visit this real Alabama ghost town. But the challenge that I want to give you for today, so that you have some more thinking to do, is actually about Cahaba being the capital of Alabama. Did you know that Alabama has had more than one capital? And I'd like to challenge you to see if you can find out how many capitals have there been in the state of Alabama, and what are the names. You already have one with Cahaba, so see if you can find out how many there were altogether and what were they. Well, until next time, bye-bye.